Wagon wheels, rolling into the unknown, the hostile, the dangerous far west. More than a century ago, hundreds of covered wagons like these lumbered over the old Oregon Trail. To celebrate Oregon's Centennial in 1959, about 30 men, women, and children relived the 2,500-mile trek. The route of the On to Oregon Cavalcade crossed the plains, surmounted the Rockies, and followed the river valleys into the tall timberlands of the Oregon Territory. The starting point of the old trail was Independence, Missouri, where our modern pioneers were given a festive send-off. Their destination, 4 months away, was Independence, Oregon, end of the old trail. These beauties, dressed in costumes of 100 years ago, made a pretty sight in an old-fashioned surrey with a fringe on top. New York Life Insurance Company, which insured many pioneers 100 years ago, delivered a special policy protecting these pioneers of 1959. God-fearing men and women were those who braved the perils of the trail. Before starting, the 1959ers asked for divine blessing. Then off they went, with 130 days and nights before them on the old trail. At mule's pace, they plodded over modern highways, past towns and cities and cultivated farms. They could well smile and wave, for no hostile Indians lurked at some unknown pass. Even so, these 59ers experienced in part some of the hardships of years gone by. At day's end, the train corralled into a snug circle, just as in olden times, when a barrier was needed against raiding Indians, ravenous wolves, and herds of buffalo that often stampeded across the plains. It was a time for rest, a time for chores, a time for scrubbing out the dust of the trail. The evening sun, setting in splendor, marked the distant goal, the West. What tales of tragedy, heroism, of triumph the old Oregon Trail could tell. The courage of the settlers speaks to us from the wheel-marked paths still visible at some points today. In one summer alone, in 1843, more than 3,000 men, women, and children braved the dangers of half a continent. For years, the trail was strewn with stoves, trunks, and furniture tossed from overloaded wagons. Scattered also were bleached bones of mules, horses, and oxen that perished, and the graves of brave pioneers who died by Indian arrow, by cholera, or by starvation. In no other part of the world, South America, Siberia, or Australia, has there been a migration of pioneers more heroic than the one that opened the American West. Each day at sunrise, the mules were harnessed, the horses saddled, to begin another trek of 15 to 20 miles more. Imagine the thoughts and prayers of the pioneers as their cavalcade slowly unwound from its nightly curl to start another day into the unknown. Could the wildest dreamer among the old-timers have pictured this sight along today's Oregon Trail? A mile-long diesel-driven freight train covering a day's march in a matter of minutes. There were nostalgic sights along the trail. A galloping herd of wild horses still roamed the prairies, where hooves of 15 million wild buffalo once shook the earth. But the landscape of the West is as awe-inspiring as ever, like this landmark, Scott's Bluff. Today, paved highways link towns and cities coast to coast. But 100 years ago, there was nothing but a vast wilderness. Barely a half dozen tiny forts were strung along the entire 2,500 miles of trail. Their names are legend: Laramie, Bonneville, Hall, Walla Walla, and at the end, Fort Vancouver. After endless days on the dusty trail, what a welcome sight those old forts must have been. Rude as they were, they provided safe haven and chance to get supplies. Friendly Indians camping nearby traded food for trinkets and white men's clothing. Our 1959 pioneers, in contrast, were gaily welcomed at every town and city along the trail. Most excited of all were the kids, who saw for the first time in their lives, outside of TV and the movies, an authentic covered wagon train. The grown-ups, too, joined the reception. Here's the train's wagon master, Tex Serpa, who led the cavalcade. Towns went all out in their hospitality. Barbecues and big outdoor picnics honored the men, women, and children of the modern wagon train. Even our 59ers found the going rough at times. They kept as close as possible to the original trail, often departing from more convenient highways and roads. While they chose to cross the main rivers by modern bridges, many streams were forded by the wagons and horses. In the old days, fording was treacherous but necessary because the trail followed the watercourses and river valleys. The larger and deeper rivers were crossed by floating the wagon bodies, which had been caulked like boats. Many foundered and were lost in the swift currents. After days of river crossings came steep ascents and slow going on the way up to South Pass. For the old-time wagon trains, this marked the Continental Divide. The midday stop along the old trail was called nooning by the early pioneers. Friends gathered to chat. Some read a book, generally the Bible. Some men shaved, but not with a safety razor like this. A buckskin shirt might be hung out to dry. Some took a siesta under the shade of the canvas. Others told tall tales to wide-eyed youngsters. Still others engaged in harmless horseplay. That is, if there were no Indians lurking about. The midday stop was also a time to care for the mules, the horses, and in the old days, the oxen. 100 years ago, this little fellow would have had a tough time escaping the stew pot of the hungry pioneers. On the trail in Wyoming, Wagon Master Serpa received an authentic Colt 45 from Dudley Dowell, representing New York Life. In the old days, said Mr. Dowell, a Colt 45 was the best life insurance a pioneer could have. With a trusty six-shooter, he stood a chance against a rain of Indian arrows. But when the arrows found their mark, it meant gravestones like these, sad memories of early days. Could those be friendly Indians atop the hill, wondering what this wave of migration will spell for them? Yes, thank heavens. They were braves from the friendly Shoshone tribes, which inhabit the lands just west of the Rockies. Our intrepid group gathered to view an Indian dance by the Shoshones. It was a special welcome for the wagon trainers. To the original pioneers, this strange rhythm presented an awesome sound and spectacle. For the red men, their dances invoked the spirits for good hunting, for success in war, or for peaceful relations with the white man. Every day on the trail, the modern merged with the old. Jet fighters saluted the wagon train. An aerial rescue food drop was staged. At the outskirts of Boise, the mayor dropped from the sky by helicopter to present Wagon Master Serpa with the key to the city. In the heart of Boise, the wagoners were greeted by thousands, many of whom added their signatures to the canvases. A group of elderly persons whose forefathers came over the old trail gave a special welcome. Then the wagons rolled again, destiny ever beckoning in the far northwest. A dramatic moment occurred when the pioneers finally reached the Snake River, for this was Oregon territory. A colorful ceremony was staged at the bridge over the Snake. It was a perfect summer day, one for speeches, for bands, for old costumes, for an enthusiastic send-off by the big crowd on the last leg of the journey to independence. Many more days of plodding remained before they reached the Columbia River. Here, wagons were loaded on World War II landing craft, a far cry from crude vessels that plied the river a century ago. Disembarking many miles downriver near Portland, the wagon train again hitched up for the final few miles of the long trek. The wagons ready, the mules started at a smart clip on their triumphant final journey. For most of the pioneers of old, Oregon was the goal. But for others who wanted to try their luck with California gold, there was another long trail ahead, the Sacramento, which wound south to the gold regions in California. The train rumbled through the tall Oregon forests, where a century ago, Easterners gazed for the first time upon a timberland rich beyond their wildest expectations. Independence, Oregon, at trail's end, had dressed itself for a gala salute. Here again were all the trappings of a period in our history gone, but not forgotten. For miles around, people gathered to welcome and cheer the modern pioneers. At a final ceremony, each member of the cavalcade was presented with a handsome plaque on which was mounted a brightly shining mule shoe to serve as a lasting reminder of the memorable overland journey to the West. Now was a time to relax. A time to reminisce with the old folks who cherish fading memories of the days when America moved westward toward a greater destiny. For them, and for all of us, the modern journey along the Oregon Trail was a legend come to life, an adventure in history, an heroic symbol of the pioneering American spirit.